You know, if I were to mention the DR, you're probably thinking about Santo Domingo or Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, but I'm not talking about República de Dominicana. I'm not talking about that resort spot. I'm referring to dominant and recessive because remember, I'm a teacher, not a speaker. You see, I teach life science and we've been focusing on genetics. Yep, we're still talking about genetics with Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics. And there are some traits. And when I talk about traits, those are characteristics that get passed from parents to offspring. Think about some of the traits. Think about some of the characteristics that your mother and father have. It could be physical characteristics like my brown eyes. It could be my skin complexion. It could be my hair texture. Those are traits that you could see, but then there's some traits that we can't see. I'm not saying that's me, but it could be high cholesterol. It could be so many other things that we just don't see. But I will say this, some of those traits, some of the characteristics that we have are stronger than others. But I do not want us to forget about those weak traits. So when it comes to genetics, those strong traits are known as dominant traits. They come first. So those dominant traits could come from our mother or they could come from our father. And they could be some of the traits I already mentioned, like my brown eyes, or if I had a cleft chin, or if I had an attached earlobe. Those are some traits that are dominant, which means if either of my parents have them, they will be expressed on me because they're dominant. However, there are some traits that are recessive, meaning that they are weaker traits. If one of my parents have them, guess what? It may not be shown. If both of my parents had them, it still may not be displayed in me. In order for those recessive traits to be shown, it's only like a 25% probability in most cases. It has to be something known as homozygous recessive. Now, that may not make much sense right now, and I'm not gonna get too deep because I know I'm a teacher, not a speaker, but I want us to still stick with the point. When it comes to certain traits, they come from outside influences. In this case, it's our parents. But when we have those traits, as I said a few times, some are dominant and some are recessive. Now, most of the time, those dominant traits will be expressed in us as they come from the parents. However, there are some times and conditions when those recessive traits are expressed. Now, the percentage, as I keep saying, is low when it comes to those dominant traits. It could be a 3-to-1 ratio. When it comes to those recessive traits, those weaker traits, they will be outdone. They will be overpowered by those dominant traits. Don't think for a moment that those recessive traits will never be displayed. Real life recessive traits could be blonde hair, it could be blue eyes. Those are actual recessive traits. If somebody with blonde hair and somebody with dark hair were to produce offspring, the dark hair in most cases will be expressed over the blonde. Once again, those recessive traits are known as weaker traits, but do not get it twisted. Just know in the ideal situation, just know that even though the probability or the percentage of it being expressed is low, that does not mean that it will not be able to be fully expressed. Because have you ever seen somebody with blue eyes? Yes. Have you ever seen somebody with blonde hair? Yes. Those are examples of recessive traits. So why am I talking about this? Once again, I'm a teacher, not a speaker. There are certain things that we contain. I'm talking about our character. I'm talking about our mindset. They may be what we may consider to be on the back burner. We may have a small ounce of doubt. We may question certain things. We may have some subliminal dark thoughts, whatever we want to call it, but those are just like recessive traits. We may think they're on the back burner. We may think they're on the back of our mind. We may think that they make no impact on us. But just know that in the ideal situation and the ideal conditions to our detriment, those recessive traits can take over. So yes, we could be dominant in our industry, dominant in our marriage, dominant in our other relationships, dominant in our physique, dominant in our finances, dominant in our mental health, dominant in so many other aspects of our lives. However, we gotta be aware of those recessive traits. because we do not want those to express themselves, because they too could take over. They too could be the highlight of our life. They too could be expressed in what represents us. And we don't ever want those recessive traits, those weak traits, to take the place of something strong, something that shows us and puts us in our best position in life. We do not want anything to hinder us from being the best version of ourselves. It's simple genetics to some, but it's life for us. So that's something I want us to think about and be aware of. Now remember, I'm a teacher, not a speaker, and I want you to have an amazing day.